Universities used to be somewhere you'd be worried about your child going and getting hooked on drink or drugs. Right now, they're going to come out an extremist on the left or a radical jihadist. You're importing the third world and you're getting the third world, and you're encouraging the third world to stay as the third world in our Western country. You will have white people sat with black people, sat with Chinese people, sat with Hindu people, all sat together. And in the corner, you'll have 10 tables of Muslims. It does not work.
I just don't want your audience to have any illusions about what Putin does to his own country and what goals he actually has.
We see an image of Putin as defending Christian values.
But that can't be further from the truth. He's a strong man, but he's not strong man for Russian people. He's a strong man for his own power. What happens to Assange or what happened to Edward Snowden, the same thing happened in Russia, just on a larger scale. And it would have happened to you, should have you been here. The highest subsidized region in Russia.
It's Chechnya.
It's Chechnya.
To stay calm.
To stay
You're
calm.
paying them not to be terrorists.
Exactly. Здравствуйте, меня зовут Михаил Светов, у меня в гостях сегодня британский политик Томми Робинсон, и поговорим мы сегодня про миграционную политику, про ситуацию со свободой слова в Великобритании и почему путинской пропаганде удается с такой эффективностью переманивать на свою сторону сторонников правого движения. Thank you, Tommy, for coming to my show. It's a pleasure to meet you.
It's a pleasure to be here again.
So, tell me, what brings you to Russia?
I've come to Russia because one reason I feel silenced in the UK. If you've seen what's happened in Britain, I'm banned from every single social media. I've committed no crime. I've not been tried by anyone, but yeah, I've had my Facebook, my YouTube, my Instagram, my Snapchat, Twitter. I've been erased from all of them. So whether it's that I'm seeking a platform, I've come to seek a platform, but also to warn people of the dangers that are happening in the UK, to give people a warning of the power of political correctness. I'm not so aware of the situation in Russia, which...
Well, I think one of the topics that I wanted to cover today is that I feel what irks me about the right movement in the West is that you have sort of this idea of Vladimir Putin as this champion of Western values, which is most certainly not. And the propaganda that he translates in Russia today, in the Sputnik media, etc., is actually targeted towards the Western audience, but is not reflecting what's happening in Russia. And I'm just wondering how much you're aware of that, and how much do you feel that there is this conflict of interest between between all those right-wing personalities coming to work for the Russian media and the actual goals that the Russian media is setting?
I think what we see, if we're told to hate someone by our media and by our establishment, which we are with President Putin, then I question it. When we're being fed what you'd say propaganda from Russia, and am I right that you said Russia today is not that popular in Russia, but mainly to a Western audience?
Hardly anyone watches it in Russia.
Well, the difference is in Britain, we're fed propaganda against other countries, but also to our own people by the BBC. So when I question everything, and it's hard not to, when I've experienced what I've experienced with the British media and the establishment, all the way to the top judges in fabricated charges, lies, when I've seen that myself, I can only question everything I'm told. So when we're fed continuous propaganda against Russia and against President Assad, I question it. I question the motives for it. So when we speak of Putin, or when I speak of Putin, all we really see is that he's not backing down. I saw the European Union destabilise Ukraine. I watched as Angela Merkel demanded NATO take military intervention. They wanted to go to war over the expansionist ideas of the European Union. I don't see that President Putin was the bad guy in that situation, that we was led to believe he was. That's how I viewed that situation. And
well, I didn't expect to discuss Ukraine with you, but I don't know. Again, I don't know your opinion on it, but he did start the expansionist war in the Ukraine, and the whole idea that
Putin did.
Yeah, Putin did, and the whole idea that the Ukraine had this nationalistic far-right government that he had to protect Russian people from is absolute bonkers. It's just not true.
But a lot of the people being funded now to fight for Ukraine are totally far-right.
Yeah.
Are totally. So a lot of I mean, Israel, actually, when you look at who's funding some of these far-right, I'd say that they caused a destabilisation, or the European Union funded and supported an uprising in Ukraine to cause a conflict. And if they done in any of our Western countries, that's how we took it, or I took it. And then even when it come to Assad, we've been told Assad used chemical weapons on his own people. After he'd already won the war. The American generals had already come out and said Assad has won this war. And then we're being fed propaganda by Panorama. And they've actually admitted that they faked certain scenes of chemical weapons against innocent civilians. So once you've had one lie by your establishment media, then you've had another. You question everything. So from my point of view...
Yeah, I understand that completely. And my point of argument here is that because Western society, Western cultures actually compromised their moral high ground that they used to have.
Yep.
Because 10 years ago, we used to look up at the West and see, we can have free press, we can have fair judges, all those things. And all of a sudden, we see what happened to Edward Snowden. We see what happens to Julian Assange. And to me, Edward Snowden is quite a personal story because it seems ridiculous that that the only place where he found refuge was Putin's Russia. And it shattered my ideal of this European and Western, in general, Western society, that they're better than us. But at the same time, there is no moral equivalency here either. Because what happens to Assange, what happened to you, what happened to Edward Snowden, the same thing happened in Russia, just on a larger scale. And they would have happened to you, should have you been here and doing what you do in Britain.
Well, we see, even roughly, if we want a fair broadcast of ourselves, we have to look to Russian news, which the BBC, if it's negative, they report it hugely. Other than that, I don't get invited on any mainstream media. I was the most watched journalist, probably in Europe, for a period. The most listened to journalist in Europe. And yet they try and distinguish or push our views as marginalised.
So why do you think you were so successful in marginalising people like you?
They weren't successful, which they were aware of how unsuccessful they were, which is why they then put pressure on private business, which is why they then got involved with Silicon Valley to basically take us away. Even if you look at Donald Trump's election, that was won through social media. What I was unaware of was that the British government has had the monopoly for years in telling people what to think, how to think about certain people or groups. The birth of social media gave me the opportunity to talk to the public. So they'd see the newspaper tell a story, and then they'd see the truth. They'd see a video put out by the mainstream press, and then they'd see my original video. And they'd see the way they've doctored it. And I think now, I know there was a European Union study into trust in media, and Britain was the lowest. Not none of the previous communist countries. Britain has the lowest trust by its public in their media. Probably lower than Russia. It
also might be the case that your polling is much more fair than would have in Russia. I mean, I wouldn't trust Russian polling in those kind of questions.
So yeah, for me, as I said, that the view we're given of Putin is that he's a strong leader. So I don't know enough about the politics in Russia, about the history of Russia, to be commenting, other than the fact that when we're fed propaganda, which we know is propaganda, I know that I truthfully believe the Assad chemical attacks were total propaganda for a war in Syria, to get the public support to go to war. We've seen it in Iraq. We lied about chemical weapons. The public were lied to about chemical weapons by Tony Blair in order to gauge support to go and invade that country and displace and kill millions of people.
So what do you think is the goal of that propaganda? What is the actual destination for the establishment?
The establishment want Assad gone. And I believe that's
a short-term goal. I mean, like in the long term, because it's not just limited to Iraq. It's not just limited to Assad. There is like a bigger picture here. What is the bigger picture?
I'd say a lot of it is to do with Saudi Arabia. I'd say a lot of the conflicts are to do with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia want Assad gone. He's a minority of Islam. They want the Sunni majority in that country. And a lot of it comes down to the politics as well, which is why continually Russia's with Iran. But their agenda, or the issues why I think I'm hated, or why the establishment despise me, is I highlight the problems caused by the globalist plan of open borders. That they wish to portray that this utopia world that they want can exist, and it can't. And we're living proof in towns like I'm from.
people have been talking about it. It's not just like it started a couple of years ago. People have been talking it since the 60s, and it's highlighted by the Enoch Powell's famous speech, The Rivers of Blood. And I was actually rereading it, the transcript, just a couple of days ago. And I was fascinated by that, the fear-mongerer, the person who's been predicting the doom and gloom, you know. He's been too optimistic about the things to come, because if you read his speech today about what he was saying will happen in a couple of years, he wouldn't, if only he predicted, you know, that London is going to be 66% majority non-British white, people would think he's insane. They already thought he's insane, but his predictions were much tamer than the things that came about. Despite all that, despite people seeing what's going on,
they still say he's lied. They still talk of him as an extremist in my country.
Yeah.
And I always say, so as I said, I'm born in Luton Town. I was born in 1982. We had one mosque. We now have 35. Every restaurant in the town is halal. The soldiers could not march through our town. They would come under attack. That's the formation of the English Defence League started because British soldiers were returning from Afghanistan and they were attacked by large groups of Muslims. If you said to people in 1982, when I was born, this is what's going to happen to Luton, people would say, never. They'd act like you're crazy, but it's like they're chipping away, chip, slowly. And before you know it, you look around. And that's why when I talk about the demographical change, I spoke about Rotherham yesterday, and Rotherham's the same as Luton. In 2013, the government growth forecast, not Tommy Robinson's growth forecast, the government growth forecast of their website said that the Pakistani and the Bangladeshi community of my town will increase by 2030, that's in 17 years, by 70 to 77%. Now, would that be the massive worry that it is if we didn't see the jihad, if we didn't see the rape gangs? If you were telling me that the Sikh community of Britain is going to increase, it's not. The Sikh community, the black community, the West Indian community, the Polish community, they're all increasing at a 1.2 to 1.4%. The Islamic community is, on average, having 5.6 children. It's a problem. 50% of Muslim males are on benefit. 75% of the women are on benefit. And the non-integration and non-assimilation is creating Islamic ghettos across our country. And as an Englishman, I have 3 children. So living in Luton, seeing the increase, knowing the hostility we face already, it's terrifying. And that's not hatred speaking. It's just terrifying. And if you love I love my children. I look at my children, I want what's best for my children. And I would do anything to give them a safe and prosperous future. I don't see a safe and prosperous future for any of the next generation.
And do you feel like Russian media helps you get a platform to spread the word, right?
I believe they portray, I understand the counter argument that people are going to say, well, of course, because that makes Britain look bad. But Britain should look bad. The world should know. If you sit here in Russia, and many of you haven't visited Britain, you probably still view it as this beautiful Western democracy, freedom, all of these things. We don't have freedom. We don't have free speech. We simply do not have free speech. The minute you speak out against the establishment, and my life is a fine example of it, unlawful arrests. I showed you yesterday in my speech.
Yeah.
Police officers come to my house with machine guns, with my wife and children in. Is this something that people of Russia would view happens in Britain because you're highlighting crimes against your people?
No, it shatters our idea of the West that actually got us out of the Soviet disaster. And I had some liberal politicians, Western liberal politicians on my show as well, and we've been arguing back and forth incessantly. But why do you think Russian government provides support for the right-wing individuals and movements?
I'd question
in
if
the
they
West?
do provide support.
Well, Le Pen in France, famously, she received funding from the Russian government, and Milo Yiannopoulos is working for the Russian newspaper now.
Maybe it's hard to say because Le Pen has been targeted so bad by the establishment in France. Maybe it evens out the playing field. They froze her accounts. That's when Russia stepped in, no?
I don't remember the details, but she did receive funding.
I believe they froze her accounts, and they deleted, I believe, just before the election, 40,000 social media accounts that were pro-Le Pen. I believe maybe because they don't want an establishment targeting war against them. I believe that they would have seen Hillary Clinton wanted to go to war. There are many within British politics who see Russia as this big bogeyman, who create Russia as the bogeyman, and not just the bogeyman, but the enemy of our people.
But there's a difference, though, between Donald Trump and supporting Le Pen, because you can't really, like the whole Russian hysteria in the US around that, Russians supported Donald Trump. This is bonkers, this is insane, it has nothing to do with reality. But when we talk about movements, like some of the movements in Germany, in France, in Netherlands, in Sweden even, you can factually prove that Russian government has been helping those movements, has been platforming them. And again, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, I'm just asking why do you think
I'd say possibly because they'd want to support people that they don't see as seeing them as an enemy. I say so many within British politics talk of Russia. It's like our politicians still believe we're in the Cold War. And our people don't see Russia as an enemy. The people don't. And I'd say that maybe Russia, at times, when I look at even the military movements of the European Union and many of our military at times surrounding. I saw a speech by Putin, I'm going back years, who said, we are very concerned with where you're positioned in your military. And when you know that there's powers behind the scenes that want war, for me, so I just look at it.
He also, Putin says a lot of things. And he also said that the collapse of the Soviet Union was the largest geopolitical disaster of the 20th century. So he's that kind of guy, though.
No, and Putin probably wants the collapse of the European Union, so it's not a big state competing. But we want the collapse of the European Union.
It's just some of the states that you see as an example, like Poland, for example, Hungary, and some of the Baltic states. I don't know if you know much about them, but the only reason why they kept their identity, why they actually became the kind of success stories that the Western right-wing politicians see as an example is because they're protected by the NATO.
By NATO,
yeah. And
I saw the concern. Was it by Lithuania or Latvia were concerned, and that NATO would protect them if Russia were to move in.
And Russia did move in, like the example of the Ukraine that we just covered, we discussed just a bit earlier, with Crimea, with the Donbas region. If only, I think every Eastern European country at the time was concerned, yes, but was relieved just because they managed to join NATO in time.
Yeah, I just see the European Union cause a destabilization of Ukraine. And I think it was the European Union's plan for expansion. And that's how I saw that situation in that country. And then I saw Angela Merkel standing up saying that she wanted military intervention after what I'd say was a European-funded destabilization of a country, because they wanted Ukraine to be part of the European Union. They wanted them to come in and work with them rather than work with Russia.
So you don't think that Russia just tries to destabilize the political situation in Europe, and that's why they fund all those groups?
I think if they wanted to, they've never funded me. So when I hear of other groups, I have been the key focal point of opposition in the UK to the British establishment and what they're doing to my country and my people. I've never had contact from Russia. This is the first time I've come to Russia. And I've only come to Russia because I made friends with a journalist a few years ago who spoke out against my unlawful incarceration. I saw that the only journalist that actually said what was happening was wrong was in Russia. And since then, I started speaking to that journalist. And so I've never had, in fact, whenever I've gone on Russia Today, I've had quite a hard time. They've gave me a hard time. It's not like they've just said, here you go, here's a platform, you get that, you spout your views against the British establishment. So I can only speak from my own experience. If what you're saying, if the view you're questioning, then Russia should have been pumping money into me for the last 10 years. Do you hear that, Putin? Which they haven't. So again, I can only go off my own personal experience.
But you've been offered a spot in Russia Today, though.
No, I haven't, no.
You haven't
yet. No, that's me joking.
All right.
And I was joking.
I saw some newspaper on Twitter. Yeah.
No, some newspaper. Again, that's a lie. What I said was, I've had my platform taken away from me, all platforms. If I had my own show on Russia Today, or on any show, it would be the most watched show in Britain. Yeah? It would be when I went on to Annie's show, so if I went on with Piers Morgan on Good Morning Britain, you know Piers Morgan, it was the most watched episode of that show they've ever had. The public, the debate I bring and the issues I raise, the public want to hear discussed. The reality is that unless you can discuss them, unless you can talk about them, which we don't want violence, we want to be able to talk about these issues, they're stopping us, they're stopping our ability to even question them. to have a discussion. There's nothing better. On my European campaign, when I was standing as an MEP, I stood in one town centre and it was the best moment I'd had. And I spoke for 30 minutes with a young Muslim lady. And it was more beneficial than anything that had happened for the hundreds of thousands of people who were able to watch that discussion. But the reality is we can't even have the debate now. We're not allowed to discuss it. And when you can't discuss things openly, when you can't sit here, we may agree on certain politics. When we can't sit here and discuss those politics, what does that leave? Where does that drive those?
I think you make a very good point in favor of anti-globalism, because the only reason why we're able to have this conversation today is because we have these competing powers that platform, different dissenting groups of each other, and that allows the discussion to happen.
So if Putin hadn't supported Le Pen, if he hadn't financed Le Pen would probably already be broken. So the opposition to what would be a globalist plan like Macron, which is a European superstate, which is oppressing the French people, there wouldn't be one. I hope in the next election Marine Le Pen wins. I hope that the Alternative for Deutschland, I believe that's one of the groups.
AfD.
Yeah, they're speaking for the German people. So the only thing I can see is that the Russian government are allowing the voice of people to have a platform. I know yourself in Russia. You probably.
No, it's just. I just hope you realize that the only reason why Putin's government does that is to reach its own ends. It's not to help your cause. It's not to protect Western civilization or whatnot. It exists just as this fight on the international arena.
I understand. At the same time, we see an image of Putin as defending Judeo-Christian values.
But that can't be further from the truth. And we were talking just before the interview about that. I think what a lot of right-wing politicians in the West don't realize is that Putin is very different, and his regime is very different from this image that is being propaganded on Russia today. For example, I don't know if you know, but we have a transparent border with Central Asian countries. And by transparent, I mean that you don't even need any kind of paper to cross the border. As long as you have a passport, you can come to Russia, you can start working, and it's, 60 million people that can just cross at will and move to Moscow and keep working there.
I wasn't aware of this, and what I found surprising when I spoke to some people yesterday at your event was the level of illegal immigration you have in each city.
And it's not accounted for because we're not even keeping track of it. Because when people crossing to Britain, at least they have to do some paperwork. When people are crossing from Uzbekistan, from Tajikistan, from Kazakhstan, from all the Central Asian countries, they don't need to do any kind of paperwork. They just cross as tourists and they stay.
So why do you think that is? Why do you think that you have that transparent border? Why do you think?
Well, it's partially it's an inheritance from the Soviet Union because they used to be
an agreement
part of the Soviet Union at the Soviet time, and the other reason is corruption because there's a lot of corruption in the Russian government, and there's a lot of interests that connect Russian government with the governments of those countries.
What would happen if they put a hard border?
Well, for starters, once you put a hard border, you keep track of people crossing, and we wouldn't get as much crime in Moscow, for example.
I spoke to someone yesterday who said everything I'm talking about with regards to the attitude towards women, they see similar here from Muslim migration.
Absolutely.
Illegal migration. They said, no,
And there are regions in Russia, like Chechnya, like Dagestan, where Russian law doesn't apply at all. It is part of Russia, but if you go there, you'll notice that they live by their own kind of arrangement.
State within a state.
Yeah, it's state within a state. And we had an opposition leader murdered a couple of years ago, Boris Nemtsov. And he was murdered a couple of meters in front of the Red Square, so it's like in the heart of Moscow. And the murderers were from Chechnya, and basically they weren't prosecuted.
The murderers from Chechnya?
They were from Chechnya.
See, I wasn't aware of that either.
There you go. So, and the murder happened in the heart of Russia. And because it happened, apparently, it hasn't been proven, but it seems like to be true because it's been ordered from Chechnya. It's been executed by the Chechen people.
Why would the Chechen people want him killed?
Well, they have the strongman of their own. His name is Ramzan Kadyrov.
The leader of Chechnya.
He's a favorite of Putin's. He's a leader of Chechnya. He's a favorite of Putin's.
The one who says there's no gay people in Chechnya.
There you go. That's the one. And he's very close with Putin. And he's been a key person stabilizing the region for Putin. But he stabilized it at cost of creating a state within a state. So
with no freedom.
Not just no freedom in the Russian sense. There's not much freedom within Russia, but separate.
Is it under Sharia?
In practice, not under Sharia, but this well, the Northern Caucasus in Russia is not traditionally Sharia area. They have their own tradition coming back from hundreds of years, and they practice their traditions still, and those traditions are protected by the Chechen government today. And Ramzan Kadyrov basically has been given a free slate to do whatever he wants, as long as
he controls his people.
Yeah, as long as he's.
I know Russia's a very different. When we talk about freedom in Russia, because of the Soviet Union and because there's so many different ethnic makeups, it's a very different situation to talking about liberal democracy in France and how you control those countries. Because the Beslan massacre, that was the first thing. I was 21 years old. I remember I was working at Luton Airport. I was not political. Even when we got to the English Defence League, forming the English Defence League, I was like most other working class English kids. Not political, didn't care about the news or what's happening in politics. I was working on a building site. I'd go watch football on a Saturday and I'd live my life, which is the one benefit I've had from my 10 years of activism is I believe we've politicised a generation. Many of our people come you seem very political. I saw your meeting yesterday, how many people were coming for how many hours? 12 hours?
12 hours.
12 hours non-stop, and you do this regularly where people are coming and they're so engaged in the entire political debate on every aspect. You have all your different sections you're discussing. Our background, when I say my background, I say a working class environment, we're non-political now. And the difference with us, and then you have the Islamic community, Islam is a political ideology. So they're brought up encouraged in politics from a very young age in the mosques. The mosque is used as a sort of command and control centre for the local area where all of them are being politicised. If there's one benefit that's come from the work I've done is I have managed to politicise a group of people who do not vote. When you we talk about democracy and freedom, I think we have 40% of people don't vote, just do not vote. I had never voted. I had never, ever voted.
Well, at least you have elections. I mean, what you saw yesterday on my conference is actually a very atypical thing in Russia. And you were complaining earlier about the state of political correctness in the UK, but it's even worse in Russia. And again, it's something that is not being mentioned by the right wing in the West. Like, what happened to you? I actually wrote an article when you were going through this ordeal, when they were prosecuting you. And I wrote that in Russia we have a law number 282, it's called, which is basically a law against hate speech. And this law has been used not just against people like yourself, it was used against random people posting random memes on the internet. And actually a friend of mine, Maria Matuznia, she was prosecuted for posting a meme on her Kontakte pages like Facebook, but in Russia, just posting this meme, and she's been put in the list of terrorists just for posting a meme. And again, you're complaining about political correctness in the West. In Russia, we don't really call it political correctness, but it's at much larger scale. People are being prosecuted for posting memes, and I don't think you see that in the West.
No, I don't see that, no. That's not that. Oh, Count Dankula. We do. Yeah. So you heard of Count Dankula?
Yeah, Count Dankula. Who made that's just insane. But
he made a joke.
I know.
And then the judge said, and the law is now that you don't get to choose the context. So it was a joke, but the judge gets to decide what the context of that is, and he was prosecuted.
Yeah, but the difference is in scale. I mean, Count Dankula was such a scandal because it was one of a kind event.
Yeah.
When in Russia, there's hundreds of people that were prosecuted under this article for doing nothing.
See, what we see now, or our biggest concern now, say I've been active, really active since 2009, so 11 years. In my first 6-7 years, everything I was talking about was the problems of Islam and the problems that it brings. My last 3 years, my biggest threat and risk to our nation is freedom. It's free speech. It's freedom to assembly. It's all of the issues that without those freedoms, then we can't talk about it. We can't highlight the problem. And now that where we've moved to is government interference with all of Silicon Valley. So when I'm sat in Russia, my main platform I use is Telegram. Okay, we'll now be looking to even Chinese platforms.
I mean, even this is ironic because the founder of Telegram
had to leave Russia.
He lives in Dubai today. Yeah. Why? Because he has a criminal charge against him in Russia for refusing to follow the government censorship and censoring people like yourself, but who write in Russia.
Yeah.
Literally, that's what happened.
I know, yeah, no, I read that. I just believed. I read the statement by Telegram, but I obviously do understand that the reason that many personalities or people who are speaking out and criticising our governments may get a platform here. But as I said, I can only speak from my own personal experience. I've never had no contact by any Russian officials saying they want to help me. I've never had it. Many people, after this trip, I'm going to be called a Russian asset just for coming to Russia. I will be called a Russian asset.
I'll be smeared as the agent of the right wing.
Yeah, you will. Yeah. But and it's like I speak out against anti-Semitism, and against attacks. I'm called a Zionist shill. I'm a Zionist Russian asset shill. Whilst being a far-right Nazi.
But I'm actually, just like you using like platforms that Russia Today allows you to use to spread the word. I'm actually using you as well because I'm trying to explain to your audience.
To reach to the British audience.
To reach the British audience. We used to have a movement that was called the Movement Against Illegal Immigration. That was much tamer than EDL even. They were just fighting against illegal immigration. They were trying to put it into a more legal sphere. And to this day, the founder of this movement is still under house arrest, and he spent many years in jail. The movement is banned in Russia under the Article 282.
What, the hate speech law?
The hate speech article, yes. And I think for the longest time, it's changing today because government is becoming more oppressive, but for the longest time, the most prosecuted political group in Russia were Russian nationalists, and that's just a fact.
You see, that's not how that's not the view we'd have in our country.
I know, because the information you're getting is from the Russian media.
No, it's not just the information from Russian media. It's the lies fed by our own. So then once, as I say, like the Russian World Cup, you had the World Cup. We were advised not to come by the British government. We were told how violent the Russian people would be. We were told how dangerous it would be. It was one of the most beautiful, successful World Cups there's been. I spoke to people who come who were so shocked and surprised at the hospitality shown by the Russian people. When they saw English people, they were like, England, England. No one would expect that from what we've been fed about Russia. Yeah? No one expected that. And the image as well, when I talk about the Putin's image as a strongman, the image of Russian men, which is what I spoke to some of your gentlemen about yesterday, is he successfully changed your image on the world stage, I believe, in the sense that whether it used to be, the view used to be of alcoholic Russian men. Now it's viewed in our country as tough men. We view Russian men as strong, fighting men who are still allowed to be.
I don't think it's so much result of Putin's work. It's more of a result of the Western demise, to be honest. Because what I've seen I spent 12 years of my life abroad. I lived in England, I lived in France, and I saw the changes that happened with my own eyes. If someone in 1999 told me that Moscow will be a safer city than Paris, I would have thought you were insane. That would have sounded bonkers to me. But today it's actually the case, and it's terrifying, and it's odd, and we
look for inspiration. That's why we're looking for inspiration. The people are looking for inspiration.
Yeah.
You saw the recent elections, but the people are looking for inspiration. Well, we look to Viktor Orban. We look to Poland. We look to Russia. We look for inspiration on how we can deal with this problem of total attack.
If you listen to Orban, if you listen to the Kaczynski brother in Poland, then they have a very grim view of Russia, and they have every reason to have that view. And they're terrified of Russia, and they see it as a threat, not as an ally.
No, I'm aware. I'm aware of reading the fear after what happened in Crimea. But if British media had not lied so much, if they hadn't demonised and slandered so much, if they hadn't been proven, Panorama, I don't know if you managed to watch the documentary I made called Panodrama.
Not really.
Panorama is the BBC's flagship programme. It is what's viewed as the best investigative journalist programme in the UK. I come out of prison after my after when I was reporting outside the court case. Now, I was reporting outside the court case, 30 to 40,000 people marched on Parliament. My profile blew up worldwide. This Free Tommy movement was spread across the world. I come out of jail to be told by someone, they are taking you down. Yeah? I then sent someone undercover to wear cameras into Panorama. I got the main man of Panorama. His name was John Sweeney. He's the most successful and popular host of this show. On undercover recordings, telling a girl if this is what I need you to say about Tommy Robinson. This is for a documentary. This is not journalism. Yeah? This is what I need you to say. Say this, say this, say this. At the end, he says, do we have a deal? I then got him saying that they're going to fabricate sexual charges against me. They're going to fabricate me to be like Harvey Weinstein. I got all of this on camera. I produced my own documentary. When they come to meet me, we sat like this for our interview because they contacted my home and said, we've got a documentary ready to go against you. Come and meet us. I sat there and then I showed them. I showed all their producers, this is what you're doing. You are fake news. You are completely, and from that, do you know, not one single, this is the biggest takedown of the BBC our country's seen. Not one British journalist reported on it. Not one. Now, if that doesn't show the people in our country, all that done when, because John Sweeney lost his job, right? He had to go, but they put him on gardening leave for 9 months. Then he had to go. No Panorama documentary come out against me because I proved categorically that everything they were doing was lies. Now, and within 48 hours of that, that's when I was removed from every single social media. And not just removed from social media, it's when I was recharged on my court case. Within 48 hours. Everything happened. Now, the telling moment for us to understand the level of corruption in our own country was that not one journalist reported that the BBC had been caught undercover creating news. Now 2 million people watched that documentary in England in 24 hours. To those people who watched it, to anyone that's followed my story, we question everything. So I understand you'd sit here in Russia.
Everything you're describing is very akin to what we're seeing in Russia. Yeah. And again, I've been slandered myself. I've been slandered myself in the same kind of manner that you described. So why do you think this decline happened in the West? Because we never had it in Russia. We always had something to look up for in the West. But why did this decline happen in Britain? You know, Britain and the US, the birthplace of freedom of speech, really.
It's an organised decline. It's an attack on family values. We are brought up to believe everything about our identity and our history is bad. We're not allowed to celebrate who we are. We're not allowed to celebrate.
But why did this happen?
Why do I believe it's been intentionally done?
Yeah.
I believe to break down our identity. I believe it's part of a European Union plan. And I generally believe that they don't want us having our own identity in countries because they wish completely control of the people under one super state, which is what I guess you're the equivalent of what you say you live under. Under one super state where we don't have our identity, where they are slowly taking our rights, and by unelected people who wish to make a mass world plan. And I used to,
they don't call it the EUSSR. For no reason.
Yeah. But what when I started activism in 2009, I used to hear people talk of the New World Order, and I used to just say, shut up, like all this conspiracy madness. As we progress and I look at the European Union, and I look at what they're doing, and I look at anyone that's crossed their paths, Greece, I look at countries, Ireland voted not to go into the European, they didn't want the euro, they made them re-vote twice. And then I watched what happened with Brexit, and I saw what they were doing. I saw that they were so close to going against democracy in our own nation. If we didn't follow through with Brexit, I think it would have been the end of the country everyone knows, because there would have been massive.
So do you think that Brexit will be good for Britain then?
I think Brexit will be absolutely brilliant for Britain. And I think that, you see, if it's not, which many people couldn't understand, okay? We didn't vote for an economy. When we got that opportunity to vote, we voted for culture and identity. And we kept hearing them tell us, oh, you're gonna have no food on the shelves, yeah? Like in Japan. You're gonna have no food on the shelves. House prices will collapse. This will happen. And we were so threatened, they flew Barack Obama in as part of the globalist agenda to lie to us and tell us. And still, against all the threats of everything, the people said, we don't care. And the truth was, we don't care. You see, if we have a recession and people have to go through hard times, we're in control of our own destiny. We, as British people, we are in control of our own country, our own laws, our own immigration. And to me, that's more important. I think if you ask people what they'd prefer, is it wealth or your culture and identity? Because in Britain now, we feel under attack. We feel like our culture is disappearing. And it's not just, and that's not alarmists or anything, because if you come to Luton, I hope you get to come to England. If you come to Luton, spend some time with me. I'll show you around. You could step off an aeroplane in any major European city now, in all the Western European cities. I could blindfold you. I could walk you onto a street, take the blindfold off and say, where are you? And you won't know. You will not know. But you'd probably say Islamabad.
But is it so much result of the European politics or your own imperial past? Because most of the immigration you get is not really coming from the European Union. It's coming from your colonies, those countries that used to be your colonies.
Many of it's not. So West Indian immigration, so again, so people understand. I'm from Luton Town. If you line up all my friends, okay, my mother was an immigrant. The whole of my town are immigrants. In fact, white English people are a minority. That's all I've ever known. I don't know this, people talk about ethno-nationalism. I don't know that. I've never had that. And to be honest, I don't want that. You know? That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is, if you line my friends up, you'll have St. Lucian, Jamaican, Bulgarian, Italian. All of us are sons of immigrants. But we all get on fine. And in that sense, it's worked, okay? There's no racial tensions in my town. They're religious tensions. And I bring this example, which I explain many times. If you go into a school dinner hall in my town, then you will have white people sat with black people, sat with Chinese people, sat with Hindu people, all sat together. And in the corner, you'll have 10 tables of Muslims. It does not work. And that's
you're not answering my questions, though, because my question is that the kind of immigration you get is from your colonies, and we're talking about Muslim colonies, like Pakistan, you mentioned Islamabad, like, I'm not sure, Bangladesh?
Bangladesh?
Yeah, Bangladesh. Those kind of places.
Yes, but which is why now we have Priti Patel about to introduce a points-based system. The only immigration that should come into our country should benefit our country. That's the only immigration. And our government and our leaders, first and foremost, is for the safety of our people. And they're failing miserably. We have, I don't know about your country, but we have 22,000 British Muslims on a terrorist watch list. 22,000. We have a great security services, but if we didn't have a great security services, we would have seen a terrorist attack, an explosion, a nightclub, an aeroplane, shopping malls. Every single month for the last 18 months, we'd have had an attack. And then people would realise in our country, we already live in a war zone. We're just covering it up. Now, the scary point that I make is every 10 years since the 1960s, the Islamic community has doubled. Every 10 years. I talked to you about Rotherham from 2001 to 2011. It went up 78%. If these numbers continue, which is what we're seeing, if these numbers continue, then where is the future for our people?
Just to mirror what you're saying, and again, just to disillusion some of the lies that Russia today is telling. In Russia, it's exactly the same case. So when the right wings, when the right-wing personalities talk about demographics in Russia, you know, I often hear that, well, look, the population of Russia grows. The only reason why it grows is because of the immigration. If you look at the numbers of the birth rate, not just birth rate, because we have the Northern Caucasus, which is contributing a lot to the statistics, but if you look at the native population, like white Russian population, you're going to notice a sharp decline, sometimes even sharper than what you see in Britain and France.
Which is why Hungary's so inspirational at the time, or to look for a solution in encouraging marriage, in encouraging families. We don't, in the UK, it's frowned upon, or the media attack this feminist movement that's been created. It is created in order to break down families, to tell them that it's not good to have children, it's not good to have one partner, it's not good to have the family unit. And that is orchestrated and organised. When we look at what's being taught now in primary schools to 6-year-old children, that boys can be girls, that girls can be boys, the confusion in their minds. And this isn't, I wouldn't say this is all a mistake. This has been orchestrated and organised because it weakens the family.
To what end, though?
The state bring up your children. That essentially, which is what they want. And when you look at the education system, 80% of professors in the UK are hard left-leaning. 80%, it's like Marxism has took a seat within our educational profession and within our universities. All of these ideas. And it's a danger.
When we talk about the international scale, we're just actors in the geopolitical conflict, yeah, because neither Russian government or the Western government seem to have any ideology or values. They're just fighting for power. They're using you, as they're using myself in the West sometimes, for as a means in that war, nothing else. So again, my only concern is that I just don't want your audience, my audience, whatever, to have any illusions about what Putin does to his own country and what goals he actually has. In my opinion, his goal is quite simple: is to destabilize the situation in Britain, in Europe.
For the benefit of Russia.
For the benefit of Russia. That's but by Russia, I don't mean Russian people, I don't mean Russian culture,
government.
I mean Russian government and his regime. And that's very different, because his regime does not exist in the interests of the Russian people.
Actually, so I am in court in 2 weeks, but I went to court 5 years ago. By British. So in that, we have the Home Office, and the police are supposed to be separate from the government, yeah? But the Home Office created a football policing branch, which is under the Home Office. It's British government. They arrested me. They come to my house and arrested me because they said that I needed to be banned from travelling to any football anywhere in the world, because my presence, this was their argument, my presence in France, because the football tournament was in France, my presence could provoke a reaction. So they wanted to ban me, and they actually made a map. This is where people in Russia need to understand. I was given a map, and in my hometown, I would not be allowed into the town centre. And I was given an entire map of the areas I would not be allowed to walk in. And it was every Muslim area. I literally wouldn't be able to walk down a street if Muslims lived there. This is what the British government were trying to push through the courts against me. I am lucky that I had a judge, and if you read her summing up, she said this case is vague, cagey, and dishonest. But all they needed to get that through was a politicised judge, which is what I faced in my later trials and most recent ones, was not just politicised judge, but judges that lied. So these sort of, and no one would expect that in Britain, right? No one would expect that our citizens are being given maps of where you can and can't walk, which is exactly what they're trying to. Paul Golding, you've heard of Britain First. Britain First were taken to court and given an order banning them from entering my entire town for 4 years. The court said you're not...
From the town?
From the whole entire town. So Luton town. And all this comes about is because Luton has a big problem with the Islamic community. Paul Golding's group, who are a political party, they're a registered political party, would come to the town and hand out leaflets. And they'd get a reaction from Muslims wanting to attack them. But not because of how Paul Golding's group were acting. They weren't acting violently. They were acting democratically. They're allowed to do that under freedom and democracy. But because of that, the court took a civil injunction by the police and banned them from entering the town for 4 years. So and again, this is freedom. And you know what? I wouldn't have a problem. But the country, Britain, pretends to the world it is. We are this bastion of freedom of speech, and we're the good guys, we're the moral guys. No, you're not. No, you are oppressing your people. You are unjustly imprisoning them. You are introducing law after law after law, which take away our freedom. What do you think if you get removed from social? What if you get removed?
Well,
what do you think about that?
If we're going to talk about social media, I'm less terrified of YouTube shutting me down than I'm terrified of the government of putting me in jail. In Russia, that's the real threat. And my disagreement with the traditional right wing, and I'm a libertarian, I'm right-wing libertarian, is that you associate your interest with sort of changing the government, when my point is that as long as you associate your success with the success of the government will bury you. Always. There's no other court of events, really, because once you create these levers of power, they will be used by your enemies to put you down.
So you must be scared, no?
I'm scared of the government, and I think that whatever evil corporation there is, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, whatever, is much less a threat than the government, because the government can use those kinds of corporations, can corrupt those corporations to reach its own end and leave you helpless. In Russia, we're in a bit better position right now because we have all those Western corporations that are not adhering to the Russian government. And that's what makes me a little bit safer. But then again, whenever I invite someone from the West, like yourself, that's where I run into real problems with the corporations, because I start to encroach onto the Western.
Well, funnily enough, so I'm YouTube, which is what I get your main platform.
Yeah.
YouTube refused to get rid of me, twice. They put out a public statement saying none of his videos breach any of our policies. Yep. It was only after continued harassment by the government, I mean, there's videos of the CEO sat there and all of my politicians grilling them.
That's why you should be terrified of the government. You shouldn't really...
Yes, the government, yeah. So YouTube
I wish there was more talk about freedom of association and how government breaches that freedom. And I think that's the key to resurrecting
I'm more terrified that my
conservative project.
I was always terrified my death would come at the hands of a jihadist. Yeah, there are 6 jihadists in jail. They were on their way to kill me. They got caught with guns, bombs, and IEDs. That was in the early days. Yeah, I'm more concerned now, and this seems crazy to say about British establishment. I'm more concerned that my end time will come by the British establishment, and so long as I always send the message every single time is that I'm not going to stop highlighting these issues. I'm not going to. We've took many knocks along the way. You've managed to silence us. You managed to imprison us. You managed to take away our platforms. I will build more platforms. We will find alternative means of reaching people, whether it be on Russian outlets, whether it be on Chinese outlets. We will, because the people still want to hear the message. They still want the debate to be had.
Do you think what you're fighting for is actually has a chance of success, or it's a lost cause?
Many people would have thought like that. I've had my wife's nan said to me, I come home once after being arrested again. Yeah. And she come home, she said, give up. There's nothing you can do. Yeah. And I said, if everyone had that attitude in the 30s, we'd all be German. Okay? If everyone had that attitude, and at the time it was a lost cause in those times, and people didn't see it as that. And you had 14-year-old children pretending they were 16 to go out and fight. And you know the fight and the spirit that was in British people. And my argument is that we have forgot who we are. So can we change it? Yes. Will we change it? Yes. What is the alternative? The alternative is that our country is going to disappear, our culture is going to disappear, our children will be enslaved, because that is generally what the alternative and the long-term future holds. So will we do everything humanly possible to stop that? Yes. So no, I don't see it as a lost cause. I see it as a very difficult cause. I see it as, I think that many people may become sacrificial lambs in this course, but it's far bigger. It's so more important. What we have, I don't know about in Russia, but we have bred a generation of cowards, a generation of people who only care about themselves, who say, I'm okay, I've got a job, I've got money, I'm all right.
Well, you've been bred for helplessness for 40 years. We've been bred for helplessness for 100 years since the revolution. And that's actually a topic that's being brought up over and over again in Russia, is that, Russian people are so traumatized that they're not fighting for themselves at all.
And they're individuals. That's what's happened in the UK. They're individuals. So they don't care if it's happening to other people. And until we regain that, what I would say is British spirit, and it's in every single one of us. It's in our DNA. It's in our history. That fight is in every English man in that country. It's just about them remembering it's in them and remembering who they are. And so much so which has been purposely targeted against us to forget who we are.
But how can you retake a country where a capital is 66% non-British white?
In London?
Yeah.
In London, you could start by encouraging those people. It doesn't matter if they're non-British white. They're not 66% are non-British white. You might have 66% aren't white, but many, like if you line my friends up, I'll have black friends who have England tattoos on them. They love England. They are English. They class themselves as English just as I do. My mother was from Ireland. I'm an Englishman. Okay. You can regain it by encouraging people to feel English and to be part of what it means to be British, but not whilst you so long as encourage them to have their own secluded communities where all cultures are equal. No, all cultures aren't equal. Our culture is far superior than the ideology that you're importing. You're importing the third world and you're getting the third world, and you're encouraging the third world to stay as the third world in our Western countries.
And it's all done to destroy the family and for the government to raise the children. Is that what you're saying?
I believe it's all done as a part of a globalist plan of control. And whether you look at the Barcelona Declaration, where it's an agreement by many European leaders to mix Europe and Africa, whether it be Angela Merkel's excuse was, we have a decline in birth rate, we need immigrants in. You bring 1 million Muslim young fighting age men into your country. You could have brought Thai people, you could have put Filipinos in. They'd work very hard. You could have put Sikh communities in. They'd have worked very hard.
When you talk about the Islamization of London and Britain and the European capitals, we have the exact same thing in Moscow.
You have 4 mosques. How many Muslims do you have? 4 million in
we
Moscow?
have millions and millions.
Millions in Moscow?
Yeah.
You only have 4 mosques? Now, the problem, I believe...
We only have 4 big mosques.
I believe, yeah, and then you have illegal ones
Yeah.
that they keep opening and getting shut down.
Yeah, well, you can just scroll down. And,
yeah, I saw it. I was shocked.
that's central Moscow, and it's not like in suburbs and...
That is a show of power.
Yeah, of course it is.
That's what they're showing.
Every time, Russian opposition tries to have a rally, we have to get permission from the government, and we very rarely get that permission. When those shows of power happen,
they can't stop it.
They get permission for
because they couldn't
tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people to flood the streets.
You see, I believe a lot of the problems in the UK. I was not aware that you don't allow Saudi Arabia, Iran, Qatar to fund mosques in your country. Many of the mosques funded in the UK and across Europe now, across Europe, are funded by Saudi, Qatar, Iran. Now, whoever funds a mosque dictates what's being taught in the mosque. So we have extreme Wahhabist, Salafist, from this big upwards, in madrasas. And I think that by not allowing the mosques, because you have a Muslim in Russia, he might just go home and be a Muslim.
We'll have different types of Muslims.
Yeah, probably more liberal.
Yeah.
Probably
well,
more
we have Tatars. They used to be part of Russia for hundreds of years.
Not as radicalized in the sense of not as jihad has not been reborn into them.
Well, again, it depends on the region. We have different kinds of Muslims. We have Tatars, which are very close to Russians, and we've been together for hundreds of years. And then we have Northern Caucasus, and you talked about Beslan yesterday, and that's where all these terrorist attacks of the 90s and early 2000s came from the radical Islamist movement. And it's still there.
That's where I see the one thing that Britain could be allies with Russia on, which is what many people see it as, is protect. We have an image that, you see what they're doing in our country. You see the attacks, the slaughters, blowing up kids, that Putin would crack down on that wouldn't allow these groups to fester and grow in the way that they're growing in our country. That's why I say we see a strong leader in the sense that
I wouldn't say that, though. Again, he achieved a certain success, but at a price of losing a lot of Northern Caucasus, because we control over Northern Caucasus regions. Yes, they are loyal to him, but they have so much autonomy inside that they're really
that must
like
be dangerous for him, because it's to say when Putin's not in power,
everything collapses.
Which it must be scary, because
it is very scary, and it's being discussed incessantly in the opposition media in Russia, because there's no solution to the Kadyrov, because Kadyrov is loyal personally to Putin.
And if he goes, then you've got an Islamist state.
Yes.
A terrorist state.
Well, I wouldn't go as far again, and it's going to get me in trouble, and I don't want to say that.
I will.
But
I've read about the leader of Chechnya.
Yeah, he was part of the military groups in the early 2000s, and his father was a prominent in the movement as well. So, but he struck a deal with Putin
to control him.
To control him, and today, to this day, Chechnya receives a lot of subsidies from Russia. So it's basically like we're paying this
to stay calm.
This piece of our country to stay calm. Exactly. And it's hundreds of millions every year.
Of Russian money going there.
Yeah.
Of Russian taxpayer money.
Yeah. It's the highest subsidized region in Russia.
It's Chechnya.
It's Chechnya.
To stay calm.
To stay calm.
You're paying them not to be terrorists.
Exactly.
You're appeasing them.
Yep. And it's been so since the start of the Putin's term.
And he must, and the government must see that as a way of control, so that they don't have the terrorists.
They don't have a solution.
No, because there isn't. The problem they have is the same problem we now have.
Once they stop paying,
there isn't a solution.
Yeah.
Because the solution is that's the problem we have now. What is the solution? Say I'm right. Say the things I talk about are right. Say Islam's not going to integrate or assimilate, and the government accept that. Okay, well, you've got 3 or 4 million followers of Muhammad in Britain. And they're having a 10 times faster birth rate than the native people. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do? And that is the question. That's the scary reality. And what do you do?
And the worst thing is, again, it's not just happens in Chechnya, but whenever you see a Chechen criminal doing something in Moscow,
They get away with it.
they get away with it because it's like this extraterrestrial jurisdiction that protects them.
They go back in that
They go back to Chechnya.
and then they don't get prosecuted.
And they don't get prosecuted. Yeah.
Because I spoke to someone yesterday who said...
And even worse, you were talking, I'm sorry for interrupting you,
That's
you were
okay.
talking about Rotherham and the things that happen to girls in Britain, but in Moscow, just recently, a couple of months ago, there was this huge scandal that there started to appear clinics where they do women's circumcisions to girls.
Female genital mutilation.
Female genital mutilations, exactly, in Moscow. Why? Because we have this thriving Muslim community, because we have...
Is that against the law here?
It's not, and guess why?
It won't
Because
be.
Northern Caucasus regions are part of Russia, and we can't enact a law that will enrage them.
Are you aware of the law in UK?
Well, tell me.
Female genital mutilation has been carries a 14-year prison sentence, and it has done for the last 25 years. Not one person. We have had 60,000 children, 60,000 British children, they're in Britain, who have been victims of female genital mutilation. The consequence of female genital mutilation is not just that they cannot enjoy sex, it's that it causes mental health issues, depression, and sometimes can't have children, all of these problems. And again, we have the problem where no one has been prosecuted, no one in Britain. I think the first case has just come in the Republic of Ireland, not one single prosecution. Why? Again, we've got 60,000 cases, and that's NHS figures from the National Health Service. Mm-hmm. So that means 60,000 young 3, 4, 5-year-old children have gone into hospital mutilated, and their parents have not been prosecuted. Because if you prosecute the parents, you fill up the entire prison system already. So female genital mutilation is one. I spoke yesterday about the gang rapes as something they can't deal with. Here's another thing they can't deal with. There are so many things coming out of this community that they are too scared to deal with. And female genital mutilation, if you realise how big of a crime it is, how big of a problem it is in the UK, it's massive.
Again, it's just as big in Russia, but it's even worse because it's legal. Like you mentioned, there is a law against it, and there's a 14-year
sentence. But they never prosecute
yeah, but in Russia, those clinics get to advertise this as a service in the Russian media, and it happens.
Insane.
And again, it's I'm not saying things I'm normally saying in my interviews, but mostly because I want to talk to your audience, and I want to
understand what's going on.
I want to explain that whatever ideas you have about Putin and the kind of state that he runs, you know, he's a strong man, but he's not strong man for Russian people. He's a strong man for his own power.
What about for the church?
The church is servile to Putin, really. It's not, it's...
Because we see that he's building more churches.
He's building
so whereas churches are being diminished across Europe, that's where this is what we see, yeah? So what I see is that he is standing for Christianity, standing and building and progressing Christianity.
But first of all, you have to understand the difference between the Anglican Church and the Orthodox Church in Russia. Russian Church is very servile. It's been so since the...
Servile?
Submissive to the government.
Okay.
So it's very submissive to the government, and it's been so since the Russian Revolution when the KGB infiltrated it, etc., etc. And those new churches that are being built today, it's really more of a vanity project because you don't see the Christian community grow. You see more churches being built, but you don't see more people attending them because mostly. Well, I think the great thing that the Western society produced in the last 100 of years is separation from state and the church. And in Russia, it's really
supposed to have.
Or supposed to, yeah. Well, at least it is so in the U.S. And in Britain, it's a bit different, I know. But in Russia, they are really fused together. Yeah. So it is still used as a means of controlling the population and making it more docile, instead of protecting the values that I think you have in mind when you think about building churches, etc., etc.
Interesting. Have you seen the protests recently in Britain?
Which ones?
Outside the schools?
No.
So from September, it's compulsory that they will be forcing this LGBT education on primary school children. Mm-hmm. Now, I've stood up for gay people's rights the whole time, yeah? I couldn't care. I don't care if someone's gay. I don't care what they want to do in their private time. I don't really care if they want to get married. Yeah? They want to get married, fine. My cousin got married to her partner. My issue is when you're teaching children, 4, 5 and 6 years old, you're teaching them that they're not born as boy and girl, that they can be anything they want to be, that they can have all these different genders, And this is what's being pushed for it. They are actually teaching 6-year-olds self-masturbation in schools. That's a teacher, a man, talking to your 6-year-old child, encouraging them to masturbate. That's the reality of what it is. And all these different books and all this different education at a low age. And actually the man who organised this in the Birmingham schools, he actually said in 2007 he wants to smash the norm of heterosexuality. He wants to smash the norm of males with females. That's what he wants to do. He's a school teacher. So he's introduced this new educational thing called No Outsiders, which he says is about tolerance. But it's not. It's about intolerance of the family unit. It's about intolerance of male and female. Now, the Muslim community have said no. And they're outside the school in their hundreds, yeah? And it's been such a massive deal. They shut down the school. There's hundreds of them protesting, and then they started protesting outside other schools, saying, you're not teaching our children this. The state are not teaching our children. One of the men has pulled their son out, and he's facing prison now. It's all about to blow up. It's all blowing up at the minute to do with the Muslim community refusing this. Now, the Muslim community are right on this issue, because the teacher is homosexual, yeah? Which I actually went up and met the Muslim community who are doing these protests, which I think surprised them. I said, look, I agree with what you're saying. Has there been one complaint in this school about the teacher being a homosexual? No, yeah, never. So everyone was happy with him teaching their children. This is not about homophobia. This is not, and to be honest, the way the media have portrayed it is that these are extremist, homophobic Muslim parents. They're not, they're parents. They're parents who, they should have a say in how their children are brought up and the forced indoctrination on their kids from the education system, which is what we're witnessing. So there's been a real clash, and I don't think they know what to do, because the left, now they have a minority that they protect over everything.
But I think the reason why they are able to defend their interests so much better than the British community is because that's the separation of church and the state in effect, because they have their own mosques, you know, that defends their interests. And you don't have that as a British
we have no voice.
They
have so many voices and organisations.
There you go. So it's really a lack of organisation and the monopoly on power that the government has over your community that doesn't allow you to defend your interests as effectively as the Muslim community does.
And this clash now, I see this, we're launching. What day is it? We're launching in 3 days. We're launching a new movement in 3 days, because I think these are one of the key issues now. 4,800% has been the increase in children with trans children. Yeah? And many of it, when you look at the statistics of it, 50% of them are autistic, and we're encouraging and confusing. Now,
the problem is what used to be regarded as a malady, unfortunate malady that, you know, that maybe demands some sympathy.
It's being celebrated.
It's being celebrated, exactly. So
and encouraged.
It's one thing to sympathize with a problem. It's a different thing of glorifying it.
That's what they're doing, glorifying it. So then children see it as, oh, they all want to be it now.
What you were describing is like it's the success of this Marxist agenda that was supposed to be put to an end in 1991 when
it was put to an end in 1991,
collapsed.
And then it just went into an education system, and whoever controls the children
that's what Lenin said.
That's what Lenin said. And that's exactly what we're witnessing. Education, universities. Universities used to be somewhere you'd be worried about your child going and getting hooked on drink or drugs and partying too much. Right now, they're going to come out an extremist on the left or a radical jihadist. I don't know if you're aware of how bad Islam has grown in British universities. The amount of terrorists that have come out of those universities.
So how did you lose control of your universities then?
Lose control, or were they infiltrated?
Well, I mean, it's the same thing.
Yeah, they were infiltrated by professors with Marxist ideas. And it's encouraged and attacked. And when it comes to Islam, it's exactly the same. You can't say no to anything. So then the money coming into the universities, I believe even Oxford and Cambridge are now funded by Saudi Arabia. In a big way.
Personally, I think the reason for the success of the Islamic project and the Marxist project is because it's an inherently international movement. So they're capable of organizing across border, while the right-wing movements are being inherently nationalistic, are much more reluctant to find connections with each other and to partner with movements from other states and countries.
which is what's needed.
Which is what's necessary to counter the effects of the Islamic and Marxist expansion.
You have all these individual populist parties in Europe
Yeah.
working individually. The only way we solve the censorship, the Islamic issue, the Marxist issue, again, is to work together.
And that's the reason why I invited you to my show, because I wanted to explain that whatever Putin is projecting in the West through his propaganda, through his media, has nothing to do with reality, and that the kind of struggle that Russian people have in Russia is akin to what you have in Britain, is akin to what German people are facing in Germany, etc., etc. Certain nuances can be different, but the fight is the same. And if you follow the propaganda blindly, you are missing the point here that whatever Putin does, it's very similar to what your government does in your country.
Okay, it's interesting. It's interesting to hear.
Awesome. I think we can wrap it up then. It was very interesting. Thank you, Tommy, for
Thanks. I hope to see you in England, yeah?
Yeah.
Cheers.
Thanks for coming to my show. Спасибо, что смотрели. У меня в гостях был Томми Робинсон. Ставьте лайки, подписывайтесь на канал. Присылайте криптовалюту, если вам нравится, что я делаю. До новых встреч. Awesome.
Thank you.